I'm Mary Virtue, and I'm the co-coordinator of the Victoria chapter of the Canadian Company of Pilgrims. As part of our video presentation series, today I am interviewing Rebekah Scott of Moratinos, Spain. In 2006, she and her husband Paddy pulled up stakes and moved to Moratinos, which is a tiny pueblo on the Camino Francés, Camino de Santiago. If you've walked this route, you have walked through Moratinos and probably past the Peaceable Kingdom, which is their home. So good afternoon, Rebekah.
Thanks for giving us some of your time. And I remember meeting you and Paddy in 2005 at a hospitalero training session in Toronto. That you and Paddy were the only ones who had walked the Camino, returned to the States and taken Spanish lessons, and now you planned to go back to Spain, find some land, find a house, find some place where you could serve pilgrims. How did you get involved with the Camino? Like, what piqued your interest? And can you take us a bit on that journey, how you ended up in Moratinos?
Oh, it's a long story. Well, a long time ago, I was a journalist for most of my career. I was a travel journalist in the early 90s, and I went on an assignment to Spain to cover at the invitation of the tourist office of Spain to write stories about this adventure tourism destination that they were promoting called the Camino de Santiago. I'd never heard of it. I'd never been to Spain. I spoke no Spanish. I wasn't really into Spain, but it was a lovely looking trip, and I thought, yeah, let's do it. And wow, when I got to Spain, they drove us down the Camino in a van, and we stayed in the Paradors and did very little walking, but met the mayor and council along the way and shook hands and saw the high points. But I was just knocked out by the whole idea of there was still Christian pilgrimage going on. And I've met a few of the pilgrims and talked with them, and they were having the time of their lives. And this was in 1993. It's a long time ago. It was Stone Age. I met some characters on that trip that are now like Camino legends. And I touch on this in one of the books I recently wrote.
Would that be this one?
Yeah, that's that one. And it was magical. I thought I gotta get back here. I gotta be part of this. Yeah. And the fact that the stories I wrote from that trip were very successful, and I had a lot of people found it very compelling that this existed, and then I was so taken by the art and the architecture, the culture that still so much existed, that culture of hospitality and kindness that I found in the people along the way. And so I thought, geez, I'd really like to be a part of this.
Just like that. Yeah.
Yeah. But it wasn't magic. It took me 7 years to get back and actually walk the Camino. But it changed my life for sure. Mm-hmm. And that trip to Toronto for that gathering, that changed my life too. I met some people there who are still dear friends, yourself included, and heavy influences on my life, and great supporters of our mission here as well. That was a weekend to remember.
Yes, yeah. It really was, wasn't it? It really was, yeah. So why Moratinos?
Well, we didn't set out for Moratinos. Moratinos is pretty forgettable. There's not anything here. It's just a little farming village. But Paddy and I had been hospitaleros for 2 or 3 years. We had done some exploring in Spain and determined some different places we thought we might like to settle. So we took the summer of 2006 and rented a car and drove around and volunteered in a series of places we knew we liked, and to see just how we would fit in and if we really liked it. So Moratinos, we stopped here to talk to a couple who were trying to start an albergue here. And they weren't here. They were off having a baby. But they told us we could stay in their yurt in the backyard. So we did. And the people in this town, there were about probably 14 people lived here then. This was in 2006. And they were so nice and welcoming and so excellent. They invited us to come back in August for their fiesta. And we came for that. We stayed in the yurt again. And that's when they showed us this house that was standing empty for about 20 years. And it wasn't much of a house. It was more like a sheep pen with some living quarters. But it was a friendly village right on the Camino. There was no other services here for pilgrims. We didn't want to have an albergue. We wanted to just be able to help out and hang out. We were ready to retire. We were both pretty burned out of journalism. So Bob's your uncle. We shook hands on the deal. And I think we got the last really great deal on real estate in Castilla y León. And within a couple, 3 months, we were living in this sheep pen.
Since I've been to your sheep pen a few times over the years, I know it's not a sheep pen anymore, but I have seen it grow, develop, be renovated, bits and pieces added, new courtyard this past year. So that's quite nice. So what's it like living in a little town like that small? Because weren't you in Pittsburgh when you left the States? Or
Yes.
Yeah.
I was, Pittsburgh is my home city, and I was working for the newspaper there. But it was a kind of a shock, but we were so ready for it. I mean, we'd been kind of plotting and thinking about this for a very long time. It was such a lovely change, and it is very small. The people here were very welcoming and very supportive. And I thought we were a little weird. I think we still function as the comic relief for them. And we served a purpose for them too, because the pilgrims were kind of a burden for them. They didn't like to be bothered with them. And we took care of pilgrims, and we took that burden off of them. And things have changed over the years. We, as the locals, more people moved in and opened albergues, and the locals have decided to open one too. So their attitudes about us have changed. They see us now as competition rather than founders or pioneers or whatever. So then anytime you live in close quarters with the same few people, there will be conflicts sometimes, but we've never come to blows. That we've had some sharp exchanges here and there. Me being a Western woman who makes her own decisions and drives a car and wears pants and drinks whiskey. I mean, that's kind of a shock for them, but they've kind of had to get used, because I am who I am, and
you're not going to change now, are you?
Well, I've had to adjust for sure, and I'm not the person I used to be. I've gotten my family was always very religious and are people of faith, and my own faith has really grown since coming here, and I've really come to depend on that. And so it's an evolution, and living here. Sometimes I think the house is too big for us. It's getting out of hand, but we have people who come and stay for extended lengths of time and help us out. We have 2 people here now helping us, and they make it livable sometimes. And they also make me capable of going out walking for 5-10 days at a time.
Yeah,
so
that's really nice,
because I do need to get out and move about. I'm still very much a pilgrim myself.
So I'm just thinking, when you moved to Moratinos, your pilgrims who were coming up the path, walking west, if they really felt that they couldn't make it the extra 8 kilometers to Sagun, those were the days when pilgrims would just knock on someone's door and say, "Can you take me in?" There was nothing in Moratinos there was nothing organized for pilgrims to stay.
No, those days were long past. When you could just knock on anybody's door.
Yeah,
when we came here, it was but the word gets out, or somebody would stop in the Plaza Mayor and just break down, and the neighbors would bring them over here. But I mean, we hardly ever. Once in a while, we get someone who just shows up at the door, but it's not nearly as much as it used to be.
Yeah.
Um,
But you still take in winter pilgrims, don't you?
oh yeah,
Yeah, because the albergue would be closed in the winter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are times when we're the only place open in 30 kilometers. So we do fill up in the months of January, February. And when the weather gets really rough, the police will go out and pick up the pilgrims and bring them here, drop them over here. But that doesn't happen too often, but it has been known to happen. Also drop off dogs and cats. I guess we're the suckers in the neighborhood. But
yeah, I would say having been at your place.
Yeah, we have 4 dogs here now and 4 cats and a canary.
Oh, how's the canary bearing up?
Pardon? Oh yeah,
the canary's fine.
He's molting, so he's not singing much, but we try to keep him out of the reach of the cats. Yeah.
So your original idea was to open a place for pilgrims to stop, a small albergue, someplace where you could continue to serve pilgrims. Do you feel that over the years, your service to pilgrims has changed? Is it a bigger picture now of your pilgrims?
It's changed a lot. Yeah. We used to just have a mattress on the kitchen floor. Somebody who needed a place to stay, they could sleep over there while the house was being renovated. There's always been a place for pilgrims to sleep here, or to have a meal and hang out or take a rest. But things have expanded. We have 3 other places to stay here now, different scales and offerings. We are the last in line, and the people who make their way here either really want to be here, or they don't have any money, or they won't spend any money, so the other guys move them along. We don't get nearly the number of pilgrims anymore, which is probably a good thing because we're not as young and spry as we used to be. I have begun to serve more in a administrative capacity on the Camino. I joined the board of the Fraternidad Internacional del Camino de Santiago. The FIX is what it's called. It's a sort of activist group here on the Camino dedicated to preserving the traditional hospitality on the Camino, in addition to a lot of other things. I focus on hospitality, and we run an albergue up on the Camino Primitivo in Grado, and I find volunteers to go there and try to keep the schedule filled up and keep them happy. Also, we've just taken on 2 more albergues, which is going to be the next miracle, is going to be staffing those in current conditions. I don't know how it's going to...
We've had one of our members of the Victoria chapter served in Grado and loved it. So tell us more about the other 2 things that you've got in mind. By the way, I think the acronym FIX is probably good. I get the idea they go around and fix stuff. So what are they fixing?
Well, on Saturday, day after tomorrow, I'm going over to Aragon, to the east here, right up to the French border, beyond Saint Jean Pied de Port. This is a different way to get into Spain on the old Caminos. And going up to the Somport Pass, and there is a little albergue there that's brand new. It was built in an old building, but repurposed. And it's a municipal albergue in Canfranc. And it's a gorgeous little place. We just signed the papers last week on taking it over to staff it and run it for the municipality. It's never been an albergue before. We've never done this before. I've never done it before. It's a new experience. I'll go there this weekend, or this week coming. I'm going to do some hiking up there as well. But spend a day over there at the albergue and see what work needs to be done to condition it, make it ready for people to be in there and stay in there. I think I have someone to open it. There's an American lady who lives to the south in Spain, and a French lady who's come down from Toulouse. to start to open it up and do the shakedown cruise. Hopefully we can open it sometime in July. God knows if we'll make it or not. Grotto, I have staffed through July. It's halfway through July onward to October. But Nahara, the other one, the great big one, the most important one probably, we haven't signed off on yet, and I don't know. It's just, I don't know. Big work to be done there. So this is the next miracle. It's going to be getting all three up and running with current conditions is even more difficult. I have not been inoculated yet, and we'll see how this works. It makes me kind of nervous being out there bashing around. Although I'm on the list, I planned this trip a while back, this week away, because I really need it. But guess what week they called me to come and have my shot?
Week. Yes.
Of course.
That's right.
So we'll see how this all works out. But those are the three places. I try to tell myself, look, a whole lot of people are under a whole lot more pressure and have much more important things going on. And I shouldn't get so caught up in this stuff and worry so much. But and because I don't even get paid for this, it's not my job. It's not my bag. It's not something I would choose to do.
But you're doing it, and we're all grateful that you are. I mean, I know that pilgrims are walking the Camino now.
Yes, they are.
My assumption is they're probably the majority are Spanish. Would I be right there, or certainly European? And
probably at least half of them are, but just in the last 2 days, we've talked to a number of them, and there's a good number of French and a lot of Italians.
So is it kind of funny right now? We're past May 20th, or we're at May 20th, and usually the Camino would just be humming.
Mm-hmm.
It must be very strange to have just a few people.
It's nice. Last year was the shocker, and I walked last year as well. We had 3 months where we could walk, and if you were already here, you could do it. That was very strange to be walking with only about maybe 20 other people in your little unit that moves along, and it was like back being in 1993 again.
Yeah,
because there's much fewer places open. The facilities were a lot more strained, or they weren't there. And places you always knew and loved were shut down and not there for you. Some people were having to sleep outside. There was a whole lot less. My fear, or my I can't say fear. I just hope that once the borders open, zillions of people don't just show up at once, because we're not ready for that. No. There's going to be a lot of disappointed and sad people if that happens. There's not been an outbreak here, thanks be to God. But all it takes is one. It's and so far so good.
You are the author of 2 books and a translator of one, The Moorish Whore, which I loved, but I found it very interesting. Very interesting. Why did you want to write that book? I was a hospitalero. The convent of Holy Cross in Sahagún has been kind of always popping up in my life. The Benedictine sisters in Sahagún inhabit a place that's been a convent for more than 1,000 years. I was over there volunteering probably in maybe 2006 or 8, very early on, and I found this little folder of the history of the place, with little flyers and things in it, sat and read it, and discovered the identity of this woman named Zaida, one of these early queens who lived there, or may have lived there. And I thought, Zaida, that's not a French name, because all of the kings at that time married French women. And I started digging around, and she was a fascinating character. She was a princess from down south, and the daughter of a poet king from the Moors.
and she was brought up to the north by this prize of war by this King Alfonso, who was raised in this convent. And their bodies are buried there in the chapel of the convent where they were. And I thought, oh, I'm going to learn about this person. And I did a lot of digging. I was a historian, trained as a historian before I ever got into journalism, so I knew how to do it. And I fictionalized it a bit because there's like two completely different stories of her, and they don't always agree. So I thought, okay, I'll make this up, and that's what I did. I think it was in 2010. I finally sat down with all these scraps and started to write, and the story wrote itself in about 3 weeks.
Really?
It took me a good bit longer to polish it and make it worth publishing. But yeah, it was it was a cool thing to do. It helped me work through some problems, or I lost a good friend right about then. It was kind of work through the mourning period. And she was, the book did very well. I was very surprised.
It was a really fun book to read. And as you say, you learn something new and you're thinking, really? Did this really happen? This is great. Just to find a little bit more of the history. It was great.
When I'm walking, and I often find these stories in places along in Spain, there's all these characters that are tied to places.
Yeah.
There's another one I want to write someday, outside Ponferrada, but another like fictionalized historical character. I really would love to write their story.
Well, don't stop. Well, right.
Well, there's too much else going on right now. Someone is asking me just today if I've been writing at all. So no, I make my living these days editing other people's manuscripts. So
am I correct in thinking that were you the editor of the Great Western Walk or the translator of the Great?
I did a lot of editing on that book, but when I translated it, because the man who wrote it was unwell, and he was not a professional writer, and the people who put it together for him, his family, after he died, they had a few pretty awkward sections in the book in the Spanish form that were out of order and needed to be put back into order, and the continuity had some problems. So I with permission from the family who owns the manuscript, I said, can I fix this up? And they said, sure, do what you want. So while I was editing, or while I was translating, I also edited. That's why I think the English version is easier to read than the Spanish.
Well, it was much easier for me to read because it's just not so hot. But I must admit that the Great Western Walk was one of the very best Camino books I've read. It didn't fit into the how I did my Camino but good category at all. It was just brilliant. I just loved it all the way through.
That's one of the reasons I'm not a translator. And I've told the family this about 5 times before they finally convinced me to do it. Because my Spanish is not up to it. And it took me a long time to do that job. But the book itself is so exceptional. It really needed to be done.
It really needed to be told.
Yeah. And I knew that English speakers would enjoy it.
Yes.
And it's certainly the most best-selling book I've ever worked on. But there were some sections in that book that were impossible to translate. Things like a card game, describing the movements in a card game that I had never played. I don't play this game. And I had to I called my friend George Greenia, who is a Hispanicist. I said, can you help me turn this into English? And he found a young man, one of his students at William and Mary, who is an exchange student from Spain, and he learned the game so he could help us translate this section. Wow. And there's other parts, like these 2 old men in Boadilla talking trash about this local woman who was kind of the party girl. That was untranslatable. I didn't know how to make this work. And happily, I got George to help me out with this very idiomatic Spanish. without being too insulting to anyone.
Yeah,
The people in Boadilla tell me, I didn't know we had a party girl here.
start looking.
Yeah.
It's amazing when you mention George. I think of how large the Camino world is, but then how small the Camino world is. This is, your latest, A Furnace Full of God. And again, I really, really enjoyed it.
Well, it kind of needed to be written. It's another book that's kind of outside the box. It doesn't fit into an easy description. It was hard to market that book when I was marketing it to publishers, because you can't say it's about this. It's not a travel book. It's not a Camino memoir. It's a memoir of a year in the Camino village, taking care of pilgrims and interacting with the locals, and what it's like to be an outsider living in this small town, and the sort of the drama and the loss, and also a lot of spirituality in there, because I am a spiritual person, without bumping you over the head with it. But it's hopefully, but yeah, and it's been very well received. I'm very pleased with it was reviewed very well in several publications here in Europe and in the United States, and I'm very pleased with it.
So the month of November, isn't that ditch pig month?
Oh, the ditch pigs is another thing, goes right back to this beginning of us being here. We pick up trash on the Camino, and we have always done that. We used to be a picnic area between Carrion de los Condes and Calzadilla de la Cueta that was just filthy. It was horrible. The pilgrims would sit there and eat their lunch and just drop their stuff on the ground. They did this for years. There were layers of junk there. It was just nasty. So we went out there with bags and buckets and cleaned it up over many trips. And we got a guy was staying with us, an English guy, and he came with us. And then the next year we started thinking, well, let's do this regularly. Let's keep this thing cleaned up. And then we expanded to the next picnic area, because it was pretty nasty too. And then as time went on, we started to think, well, let's just walk a day. We'll start in Carrion and walk home and pick up trash for this 30K. And then people started to join us. And we moved it to end of November, early December, because the airfares were lower, and because we'd had a frost by then, and the frost had killed the weeds in the ditches, so you could see all the trash in the ditches. So there were these different reasons to do it then, and people enjoyed it. And it expanded into 3 or 4 days, and we got a little cart made. We got a grant from I think American Pilgrims gave us money to make a cart to roll along with a trash bin in it, and so we could go into more remote places and not have to schlep the bags out. So we developed a technique, and we developed logistics in time. And before the COVID hit, we had the biggest crew we ever had was, I think, 8 for 5 days, and we cover about 100 kilometers now during a session. We've been to Portugal. We cleaned up the central route. At one point, we did the Camino de Madrid from Medina de Rio Seco, and all these different routes and different places. And the pilgrims tell us where they've seen a bad problem, and we'll go there and clean that up. A positive thing to do. And people come from Switzerland and UK, America and Canada. We've had Canadian, at least one. And yeah, it's a good thing.
Yeah. Well, I must admit that every Camino I'm on, there'll be 1 or 2 days where that'll be my trash day. Anyway, is there anything else you'd like to say to us? All us Canadians here, all those on the coast.
Well, we do have the Peaceable Projects, which is another division of. We move money from. We have donors mostly in North America who send us money. We're a nonprofit registered in the United States, and so Americans who give us money can write it off their taxes. but we take this money and we find places along the Camino in need of help. Sometimes individual pilgrims, sometimes individual hospitaleros, or a albergue in need, and usually critical needs that need to be responded to rather quickly. Leaking roofs, tires for cars, and we try to keep it small and keep it light on its feet. So when there's an emergency, we can step up and help out right away. Also help out with objects and personnel. Somebody needs beds, we can find them beds that somebody else isn't using. So it's not just money, it's other resources. But it's becoming a real problem for me in the United States. The taxes in the state of Massachusetts, where we are registered, the bookkeeping is just incredible. And I don't know how to do bookkeeping. I'm not a bookkeeper. I don't know anyone who can help me. And I don't know what's going to happen with it because it's too much for me. I'm overwhelmed.
So you need a volunteer bookkeeper.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I mean, I can buy new boots for pilgrims whose boots broken, or smaller things like that. That's what I prefer to do. But we'll do refrigerators, Lord. And the biggest thing we ever did was Holy Cross again in Sagoon. They needed some plumbing work, and they were overwhelmed by the price. They were going to just shut down. They couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
And I was like, no way, man. How much is it going to cost? They said 20,000 euros. And I thought, wow, we can do that. We can do that.
Now, what a wonderful feeling. What a fabulous feeling. Well, we could do that. It's not out of my pocketbook, but we could do that.
I can give some money, but if he gives money and you give money and they give money. And as it turned out, when we started getting some, a lot of people gave us 20 euros, $20. And then as the momentum built, we got a legacy. Somebody gave us 10,000 euros. So it was like, wow, we're almost there now. So it was spectacular, and it was fully funded, and they are back in business. They're open right now.
Anyway, thanks very much, Rebekah. It's just been a pleasure.
And find out what you're up to in Spain, and find out how Spain is doing and how the Camino is doing. So we're very grateful to you for spending the time with us for our Camino video series.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.